Hi folks, Will at LR Workshop. Yes, it's another Rest of the World Spec Defender. Just can't get enough of them, just can't get enough. But I'm going to talk about Land Cruisers just briefly. I'm back in Africa. I was last here last autumn and I recorded a video about how I thought that Toyotas were outliving Defenders in Africa based on the fact that if a Toyota gets written off, it's less likely to be put back on the road, therefore the parts go into a pool to keep the other Land Cruisers going. You've got just essentially quite new, genuine parts available, whereas Land Rovers rely on the supply chain because people want to rebuild them. Therefore the parts get hoovered up and any used parts get put onto other vehicles and get used and run out for the their the end of their useful lives, whereas Land Cruisers get replaced. So I'm going to add an extra bit into this because there's a Land Cruiser here in this fleet that got rolled and written off. It was like less than 2 years old, maybe even a year old, and it got rolled about 6 months ago. The wings and the bonnet are all trashed, they're pushed in, the roofs are up here, this is all stoved down in, the rear windows smashed, there's dents all down the left hand side, and the rear axles, one of the bolts has snapped and the axles are out of alignment. And it's just been left. It's just been left there. And it's brought a really interesting perspective because actually someone's been trying to get it back on the road in the last few weeks, trying to work out how it can be put back on the road. Now, it's not been cannibalised, it's just been set up under a tarpaulin. It's not been cannibalised because the fleet here are pretty new. They're all about less than 3 years old, the Land Cruisers, so they only need brake pads and engine oil changes done. So it's not been cannibalised, but no one's attempted to get it. You've got a brand new vehicle now. This thing cost $36,000, and it got written off before it's had any real chance at having a useful life and be able to see out the value that's been put into it. But it's just been left there. Now, someone in the last few weeks has been working to figure out how to get it back on the road, and they've priced it up $3,000 for the front body panels and the wings, and then $1,500 for somebody to basically panel beat the rest of the body out. So $4,500, we're talking about approaching 15% of the cost of the vehicle originally to be put back into it to get it back on the road. That seems like a good thing to do. So I guess my original thoughts about the fact that a Land Cruiser get more easily written off, it's not necessarily true. You can fix them if you want to be, but why hasn't that one been fixed when it could be? Someone has found out that it is possible for a bit of effort and money could be back on the road. Now, I think what it's come down to is that if you're running the fleet and you've got a load of mechanics, why wouldn't you attempt to put that back on the road? Or rather, if it was a Defender, what would you do? Well, you could strip the Defender body down in a day with a few people, and you could put other body panels back up. You've probably got used body panels, put them back together, and then you've got the vehicle running again probably within 3 days and not having to spend much money to get it back on the road using used parts. You've then got a kind of a worse vehicle because all the parts might be used and they might be beaten up already. So, but when you've got a fleet of general mechanics and people that know how to unbolt and bolt things up, and it's very accessible to be able to fix a Defender, you kind of think, yeah, I could have a crack at this. But when it's a Land Cruiser, there may be this extra level that says it's a robot-built body shell. Maybe it doesn't feel so accessible with the resources you have. Now, someone is going to be able to put it back on the road by panel beating the body. Now, panel beating is probably a next level kind of skill compared to your basic mechanic. I imagine it's quite tricky. I mean, if you're going to be panel beating this corner up here on the Land Cruiser, you've got to get it just right so that things shut. Now, this is Africa, so they may say 1,500 quid, we're going to do it, but you may end up with a door that doesn't properly shut or what have you. So there's probably a caveat there. It's probably quite difficult to get it back to original standard, but you can get body shells. I remember seeing body shells in Malawi when I was there that you could potentially buy a body shell and stick it on. But it's not happened. But it probably would happen with Defenders. Maybe it's lack of spare parts. I mean, although in this town there is a Toyota dealer. We're in the middle of like bloody nowhere, but there's a Toyota dealer where you can get parts for Land Cruisers. There are Land Cruisers everywhere. I mean, on the commute to work, there is a Land Cruiser graveyard. So I'm sure you could find some stuff, but it just hasn't kind of happened. And I wonder if it's the kind of the mental kind of thing that people don't expect Land Cruisers to be as easy to repair as Land Rovers in terms of the bodywork. And it just kind of doesn't happen, even though that maybe in practical terms, it may not be that much more difficult, and it may be just as fine. We don't know. So I find that quite interesting. Naturally, it's only one anecdote out of the bloody millions of the vehicles there are running around in this country. The Land Cruiser, like every third car is a Land Cruiser 70 Series here. Epic. It's just epic. It's not the same in every country, but this one, yeah, there's quite a lot. Yeah, so that's maybe my update. Maybe Land Cruisers aren't necessarily outliving. I think actually still it's just a numbers game. There's just so many more of them that a Land Cruiser dies, doesn't matter to some extent. Whereas if a Land Rover, even if it's like brand new, and this is kind of thing, maybe there's that association. A Land Cruiser dies, there's loads of them, relatively cheap compared to what Defenders have been or are these days, and it's just not attempted to put them back on the road as such. It's kind of like from a fleet manager's perspective, great, you've now got a good excuse why you've got a reduction in the capability of your fleet, and at the same time you've got a whole load of like good parts have become available. But maybe it's just a time thing. Maybe it's just a time and effort of figuring out, because you may not have panel beating skills within your workshop team. You may have to outsource, and in this case they will have to outsource to get that vehicle back on the road. So, interesting. I'd love to know your thoughts below. Naturally, these are all just like swimming around in my head. It's not based on any kind of scientific or statistical analysis whatsoever. It's just based on the experiences I have from seeing this stuff go down in Africa. Leave a comment below. I hope you don't mind me talking about Land Cruisers, but I just find it fascinating, the two different approaches to the same, I guess, 4x4 solution, and it tends to divide people. But certainly from a fleet perspective, fleets are where it's at. The fleets are the reasons why these vehicles exist, particularly in Africa. So there we go. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.